Guys, it's Mikey. Happy Thursday, or as I like to call it, Happy Friday Eve. Um, I've got some thoughts that have just been on my mind today, and figured could be an opportunity for a conversation. So figured I'd give this YouTube live a try. I've never done a live here on YouTube, so that's different. Um, and so I figured, yeah, let's use this opportunity. I wanted this page to be, this YouTube channel to be a way for me to uh, be unfiltered, right? To have real conversations about real things, about real life. And what better way than to go live when I've got a lot on my mind and just looking to vent. So, the biggest thing on my mind today, this Thursday, is my grandma. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother. Yesterday was her birthday. She just turned 95 years young. My dear grandmother, Altagracia. Remember her name and say a little prayer for her. But she just celebrated her 95th birthday. Happy birthday, mommy. And, I'm out here in Southern California, and she's in Yonkers, New York. For those of you who are tuning into my channel and know me, you know that I'm originally from New York City, born and raised. You can probably hear it in my accent. I get told that a lot. But I've been living out here in Southern California for the last 7 years, coming up on 7 years in October. And so I don't get an opportunity to see her very often. I did see her earlier this year when I went out to New York for a visit to help my mom with a few things. But my whole family is out there. My mom, my sister, a niece, my nephew, my brother, my younger brother. So they're still out there, all my friends, family. And we're out here in California, trying to make our life together out here. And so I got to see her. This was back in May. I went out there. And then prior to that, I think 6 months before that, I was out there. So I was out there October-ish. And then before that, I was out there 6 months before that. So, I don't normally go out there every 6 months, but it just worked out that way recently. So I've been out there a bit, and every time I get a chance to get out there, I go and I visit and spend some time with my grandma. But I couldn't be out there for her 95th birthday, and so that weighed a little heavy on my heart, because we never know how much time we have left, right? And 95. I mean, that's huge. That's milestone, right? Like 95. God bless her. And she's one tough cookie. She's one tough cookie. Sadly, she had a medical incident back in 2000. She had a brain bleed, and she had to have that drained. So with that whole thing, that procedure, they've got to sedate you. She had to be intubated with she had the trach installed, and she was unconscious for they kept her sedated for healing. They had extubated her. Um, And during the extubation, she had some difficulty with inflammation and then breathing because of the inflammation in her airways. So they had to intubate her again and put the trach back on. Um, but through all of that, she came out of that doing well. She, had lost some muscle strength and the ability to stand on her own, and needed a wheelchair, needed physical therapy. But sadly, my my aunt, she supposedly has, proxy, healthcare proxy and guardianship over my grandmother. So all of the care, all of the decisions are made by her. And I will just say that my mother's side of the family, we have never really been close. I remember as a child, going to some of my aunt's houses and celebrating holidays with them, and, there being more frequent visits. But I think all of that kind of stopped, at least, in my memory, it all stopped around the age of 12. And they just kind of did their own thing. We did our own thing. And slowly we all drifted apart. And so this particular aunt, she's always been rough around the edges. I'll just put it like that. And very opinionated, very difficult to deal with. And, her having control over my grandmother's health and well-being has really opened my eyes to what I would call elder abuse, because the anger and resentment and hate that she carries in her heart, she lets that spill over into how my grandmother is being cared for. And I say that because my grandmother's been at this nursing facility, which is now called Hudson Hill, up in Yonkers. And that place, they've changed their name a number of times. They're undergoing renovations to try to acquire a more upper class, upscale clientele, I guess, if you want to call it that. They figure by changing the facade and changing how the place looks and making it look expensive, that they can charge you more, or get away with charging your insurance more. And sadly, the people they employ there are horrible, horrible people. The few times that I've had to visit, that I've gotten a chance to visit over the last few years, again, she's been there since at least 2000. The state that we find her in isn't something you'd ever want to see a loved one have to endure. I've visited where she was completely naked on a mattress on a floor. And when I approach the nursing station with questions, I'm treated as a bad guy. I'm looked at, as the enemy. They look at me as, why are you asking questions? Why are you telling us what to do? Or, it's like, then they'll give me some sad excuse like, oh, she took off her clothes. Oh, she pulled off her diaper. And it's like, well, if you're going to give me an excuse like that, then that means you are aware of what happened and what she did, and you allowed her to stay that way. And often it's because they don't know, like when I'm flying in, they don't know that I'm coming. They don't know when I'm coming. So I catch them off guard. And I feel like that's often the best way to deal with places like this is to catch them off guard. Um, and so I catch them off guard and they try to give me some shitty excuse, right? But it's like, how are you going to give me this shitty excuse that she pulled off her diaper and she took off her clothes? And you're aware of that because I'm coming to you at the nursing station. You're aware that she did this, supposedly. And yet she's still in her room, naked and with no diaper. Um, so you knew and you left her like that. Other times I've found her with a dirty diaper, and I know she's got a dirty diaper because she's at this point in her health and care. She clearly, right? So it sounds like she's gasping for air, and that's mostly because they have the hole in her throat uncovered, so the air escapes as she's trying to catch her breath and as she's trying to speak. It mostly just comes out of her throat, and so she'll appear frustrated, and she'll be pulling at her diaper or her pants, and she'll basically be trying to tell you, you know, that her diaper is dirty. She's using words that she only speaks Spanish, so she would use words that you would know. She'd say caca or caga, or she'll say something along those lines, which means I've got a shitty diaper. I need to be changed or whatever. And so I'll go to the nursing station and I'll tell them, hey, my grandma's got a dirty diaper. Can we have someone come over when they have a moment to change her? Because who wants to sit in a shitty diaper, right? Um, and so, again, just the act of going to them to tell them this, they get angry, and they and you can tell that they're angry because just the way they look at you, it's like, who are you? Or, yeah, okay, we'll get somebody over there, right? It's just like they brush me off. And so this has happened twice, on two separate visits. And, an hour, 2 hours goes by, 3 hours goes by. And I go back to the nursing station. I'm like, hey, we're still waiting for a diaper change, and it's mainly because my grandmother becomes restless. She becomes, agitated because she's sitting in this, right? Um, and so they'll be like, oh yeah, it's a little busy right now. Somebody will come by shortly. And it's like, okay. And then another hour goes by. One time it was already like 6:30 in the evening, and I had been asking for like the last 4 hours for somebody to come over. It was like 6:30 in the evening, and visiting hours ended at 8, right? So I'm just like, 6:30, 7 o'clock, I go over again, and I'm like, hey, you know, we've been waiting a few hours. I understand that it's busy. I just want to make sure that someone's still coming out to change your diaper. And they're like, yeah, yeah, someone will be over. And it's just that brushing off attitude, that's just like, okay, I get it. I get it that you may be busy, right? But the thing is you can't tell me that you're busy, and then you've got 4 people at the nursing station just shooting the shit, right? Just bullshit. And my grandmother's room is right outside the nursing room. So I come right outside. The nursing station's like right there. So I see you, I hear you, right? I see the other people that are there gathered. And so, you know, when you tell me you're busy and that no one's available to help at the moment, but yet you're all sitting there, you got 3 or 4 people sitting there talking shit. It's like, okay, I think you're really just ignoring me, and they don't hide. They don't hide that they're ignoring you. They want you to know, and part of the reason for this is, and they did this with my oldest cousin, who lives maybe 10, 15 minutes from this nursing home, and she would visit my grandmother often. She spent a lot of time there. She cared, took care of a lot of the day-to-day stuff for my grandmother, um, and would, bring things to their attention at the nursing center. Um, what they ended up doing to my cousin was they banned her. They banned her from seeing her own grandmother. I mean, banned. Like, again, yesterday was my grandmother's 95th birthday. My cousin uh, brought over her mom and her daughter and my uncle and my mom and a few other people. And my cousin's been banned now for, I think it's a little over a year. She's been banned, and mostly because my aunt supports this tactic, I guess I should call it, of keeping my grandmother isolated. So she doesn't want my grandmother to have visitors. She doesn't want my grandmother to have interactions. She doesn't want my grandmother to have therapy or rehabilitation. She stopped the speech therapy. They were doing speech therapy, and I guess like retraining her for how to drink fluids and food, um, and speech, because of the trach. And my aunt stopped the therapy. Sorry, the fire truck. My aunt stopped the therapy because they were telling her at the center that my grandmother would never. They told her a couple things. They told her, supposedly, and they had told us this as well, the social worker, back in 2020, that my grandmother would never walk again, that she would never eat again, that she would never be able to drink again, and that she had to have this, the feeding tube. Um, And so initially they were giving her the therapy, right? And she was making progress because my cousin would go over, she'd bring her some soup, and my grandmother, would eat the soup, the gravy from the soup. She was doing fine. She was doing the physical therapy initially, and she was doing fine. She was able to sit up in a wheelchair. She would move her legs around and do different types of seated activities. And I have video footage showing this. And I have video footage showing her in a better state. And again, this is 5 years ago, right after the procedure, and her first month in this rehab center. And then my aunt, because of whatever with the social worker and stuff, they came to the conclusion that my grandmother would never be able to eat, she'd never be able to talk, she'd never be able to drink, and that she wouldn't be able to stand or walk or anything on her own ever again. And so my aunt somehow agreed to this or believed it, and my grandmother's been in bed, like, for the last like 5 years. She's been in bedbound. My aunt doesn't allow her to be put in a wheelchair. We wanted to have her 95th birthday. We wanted to celebrate her birthday. My mom, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, my little cousin, my other cousin. They were working on, doing a little celebration for her. And they were going to use the rec room, on the floor that my grandmother is on. And initially, my cousin had reached out, and they were going to get the room ready and decorate. And then my cousin got a call stating that my aunt, and I'm guessing the head nurse or supervisor for nursing, denied the request. They denied us celebrating our grandmother's 95th birthday. They denied that, allowing us to have her get dressed, put on a wheelchair, and wheeled into a recreation area. What was done instead is that balloons and the party and whatever and the guests, and they all went into the room and they made her room the uh, party place, right, where they celebrated her. Many of us on FaceTime and video, just so that we can be a part of it. But they denied us, and it's like, how do you deny a 95-year-old the dignity of celebrating her own 95th birthday? Like, who does that? And that just weighs heavy on me, because it's like what my aunt is doing by denying family visits, like denying my cousin. My cousin was talking to security downstairs. Security was like, "Well, why don't you go upstairs, take a picture and do all that stuff." My cousin had to sit in the waiting room in the lobby and participate by video camera, by FaceTime, because she's banned from visiting my grandmother because of my aunt and the nursing facility. And so my cousin, security was like, "Well, why don't you go up, you take the picture." My cousin would have loved to take a picture for generations, right? My grandmother, her mother, her and her daughter. And security was like, "Well, why don't you go up?" And so she was going to go up, but she wanted to do it the right way, right? She wanted to sign in, check in, do all that stuff. So this particular nursing facility, they use a camera-based visitor thing. So they take a picture of you, they scan your face, take a picture of you, they get your name and stuff, and then they print out this paper badge with the picture of your face on it. And so my cousin goes to the kiosk, scan her face, and the alarms start going off and on this kiosk, and the screen is flashing red, and it says, "Do not let this person in, contact the administrator." And my cousin was so embarrassed that it's come to this, that my aunt thinks that this is how my grandmother should spend the rest of her days, laying in a bed. This woman, my grandmother, up until this incident happened, where she ended up with the brain bleed, that was at 89. She was 89 when this happened. My grandmother was super active. I mean, she would walk anywhere and everywhere. She would be everywhere. Do her shopping. She'd go get her hair done. Everywhere. She'd go, to the restaurant. And after this brain bleed happened, she ended up in the nursing home. Again, she ended up at this place because she needed rehabilitation. But they failed to do the rehabilitation, and she ended up being there as a resident in the nursing home now. And but I remember as a kid, when my grandmother was like 65, 66, 68, she would take the train from Brooklyn with two big tote bags full of stuff that she'd bring us as kids, and she'd travel from Brooklyn to the Bronx on the train, walking, carrying two, big totes full of stuff that she had bought for us, or stuff that, she thought we could use or needed. She was very, very, very active, very strong woman. Could never stay still. You couldn't keep her in one place. She was always out and about, loved being around her family. On her birthdays, we would often travel out to her. When I lived in New York, we would travel out for her birthday, pick her up a cake and sing her happy birthday, even if it was just us, if it was just me, or if it was, me and my mom and my siblings. My cousin often would do it, set something up. And now she's sitting in a nursing home. Laying in the nursing home. And for months, they had her on a mattress on the floor. Now I get it that she may be a fall risk, right? Because she does try to get up, because again, she's a very active. Her life was always very active. And so she does try to sit up on occasion. Um, and this is where it's important that she at least be able to sit in the wheelchair so she can sit up. But she's laying down all the time, and she was on a mattress for a very long time, and mostly because the the nurses didn't want to deal with it. They didn't want to deal with her trying to get out of bed or the risk of her falling. It's easier just to keep her on the floor, right? And then we had an incident where she was on the floor and she'd roll off the mattress and end up on the floor, and then she's dragging herself all over the place. Visit her, she's got bruises on her face, she's got bruises on her hands, her uh, legs and feet are all scratched up. And we we visit, and it's we go to the nursing station like, what happened to her? Again, because my aunt is the proxy, my aunt is the only one who's ever notified of things. But on that one occasion that we went to visit, it was about 2:30 in the afternoon, and we found her, with bruises and scratches, and and this is my mom's mother, right? And I could only imagine if it was me coming into a space and this is my mother and she's bruised and scratched and, her face, all this stuff, I'd be pretty upset. I'd be pretty upset. I'm putting my mother in this facility and I'm entrusting you with her care and well-being, and I'm coming for a visit and she's got battle scars, right? And so we go out to the nursing station. My mom, I have to calm her down because I'm like, Mom, let me deal with it. Because my mom, she, because of the years of having to deal with the people in the nursing facility, my mom doesn't have anything nice to say. And her approach is, rough and abrasive, so, you know, because in my mom's head, she believes that they're abusing my grandmother there. And, it could be true. It could be true, but we have no proof. So, I told her, I said, let me deal with this. Let me see what's going on. So I approached the nursing station. I'm like, hey, we're just arriving for a visit with with my grandmother. And, we noticed that she's got some bruises on her face and her hand, her arm, and her feet. And they're like, oh, she got out of the bed and, she was pulling herself on the floor. And I said, okay, well, the bruises on her face. And they were like, well, she had taken her diaper off and she had covered herself in feces and she was trying to wipe it off and she scratched herself and in my head I'm like, okay, um, has anybody been notified? Has the family been notified? Because we're coming to visit and this is the first thing we see. We haven't been notified. And we wouldn't have been notified, to be honest, because again, my aunt is the proxy, right? And my aunt doesn't talk to the rest of the family. She's on a power trip, and so she doesn't talk to the rest of the family. She doesn't feel she owes anybody any explanation. She doesn't, in her mind, and she said this to my mother, is that she just wants my grandmother to go because she's tired of dealing with this. And so she goes about her day living as if my grandmother doesn't exist anymore, as if my grandmother's passed. And she's only reminded that my grandmother's still alive when the nursing facility calls or, something comes up in the family because of my grandmother being in this facility. And so I asked, has anybody been notified? Because, we haven't heard anything. So my mom comes out, my mom is like, what's going on? Why is my mother looking like this? La, la, la. And the first thing they do whenever it's my mom is they're like, well, we're going to call Yolanda. We're going to call your sister. And, because they know that they've got her in the palm of their hands and they can say something and she'll believe them because she doesn't want to deal with it. She doesn't want to be bothered with it, right? So they get Yolanda on the phone and they're like, "Oh, your sister's here and she's being rude and blah 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 blah, and your nephew's here and and I'm like, um, first off, my mom's not being rude. My mom's angry. That's her mother, and we came for a visit and she's battered and bruised, and so the the head nurse, she ends up walking away to talk because she's like on a cordless phone or whatever to talk with Yolanda. And she's feeding Yolanda whatever story she wants to feed, right? And so I'm like, you know what, you got her on the phone, great. So I tell my mom, I said, listen, they got her on the phone, they're going to give their story. As long as she's aware that we arrived here today and found her battered and bruised, and Yolanda's aware of it, that's all we can do, right? Because if something else were to happen now to my grandmother, the proxy is aware that we were here, we saw this, and you allowed this to continue. And this is the life my grandmother has to live, after years and years and years of being there for her family, being there for her grandkids, her great grandkids. She was always a big part of my life. She was always around. She was always, helping my mom being a single mom. She was always, I look at my grandmother as my mom, because she was just always there for us. And, she always did whatever she could for us. We spent a lot of time with her at her house or her coming over and visiting us. So, to see her living out the her last, years like this, it's painful. Like I wouldn't, that's not living, especially for a woman who's been so outgoing and active and, you know, involved, right? To just wither away, laying down in some nursing home where you can't even have visitors. Like it's like, how do you prevent people from visiting? My grandmother does suffer with a little bit of dementia now. Maybe not a little, maybe maybe a lot of dementia, often. But there's times where I come and visit, and she's on point, and I know she is because she doesn't have her glasses on, so I know that she struggles to see, and I speak to her all the time, and I when I'm there, and I tell her who it is, and and she'll grab my hand and she'll kiss my hand, she'll grab me and hug me and kiss me. So I know that she's there. I know that she's aware. Um, and she'll, try to say some words. Again, it's difficult for her. And, just to see her there like that, it's that's not living. That's not living. And it's a shame that family is allowing this to happen to her, that they're allowing her to live like this. This is not living. Um, and our hands are tied mostly because, my aunt has the proxy. She has the guardianship, the healthcare proxy and all that stuff. So the guardianship documents that say that she makes all of the decisions and stuff like that. And one of my other aunts is, I guess, the backup for her, but that aunt isn't any better, because she's already been tainted by the other aunt. They all taint each other. They all taint each other because because of my grandmother being, in this nursing home. They don't communicate. There's no communication. They all just point the finger and blame each other for lots of things, and they blame my grandmother for lots of things. Mostly this particular aunt, Yolanda, blames my grandmother for her childhood or whatever. It's like, get over it. But yeah, I just had to, get some of that off of my chest. I just left a review for this facility. This is my third time updating the review. I've been reviewing this place for the last 3 years, when I finally decided to leave reviews for this nursing center because, again, they've changed their name a number of times. Now they're doing renovations and fresh coat of paint. They've been in renovation for like the last year. So the main lobby's closed. The main recreation room is closed. You have to go through a crazy obstacle course to get upstairs. It's just sad. Like, my grandmother can't be put in a wheelchair and brought out to the garden. She can't be brought to the rec room. She can't be put. My grandmother speaks Spanish. She's that's her language, her native language. We're Puerto Rican. She speaks Spanish. All the nurses don't speak Spanish. All right, they're from wherever they are. Jamaica, Nigeria, Philippines, from all over, except from somewhere Spanish, right? The only people who speak Spanish are the janitorial crew, right? But they're not interacting with my grandmother. So how do you have people caring for someone who speaks Spanish that doesn't understand Spanish and doesn't speak Spanish? Or in my grandmother's case, she can speak a few words in English, but because of the trach hole, she can't communicate, right? It's like, right? And she understands some stuff in English, right? So she can understand some things, but then her response will be in Spanish. And you got people who just don't understand her, caring for her. So how do you do that? There's there's that communication barrier. And so that's part of the challenge. The other is that these people don't care. They don't care. You may have one or two people who really care about their jobs and care about the people that they're caring for, but the bulk of the people don't care. And and you see it. They don't hide it. I'm a visitor coming into this facility, right? And immediately I can see how your attitudes change when a visitor is around, right? They don't like it, because when a visitor is around, especially someone who's unscheduled, right? They have to change what they're doing. They have to change how they act and how they respond. They have to look busy, and they don't want to do that. And so they prefer, and this is where they work in cahoots with my aunt, they prefer that my grandmother not have visitors. And again, it's very rare when I see other visitors on this particular floor. Um, so they prefer that, and of course my aunt prefers that she not have visitors. Now I hope and pray that we get a few more years with my grandmother, and to continue to be able to celebrate her. But it's sad, and it hurts to go in and see her, and this is her life, on a mattress on the floor. They've upgraded the mattress to now floor a floor lowered type bed. So she's in a bed that can be reclined and elevated, but it's all the way on the floor. Where for months she was just on a mattress on the floor. And so when they were, putting her feeding, and she's, got the line going in, she's laying flat on the floor. And it's my understanding that she shouldn't be, right? When you're having feeding, because then you have the risk of the fluid building up in your lungs, or choking, or whatever. But again, it just goes to the care and the attention that the nursing staff there is lacking, and the attention that my aunt is giving for her care. Yeah. Well, this was a long, lengthy rant. I just had this heavy in my mind, right? Heavy in my head, and heavy on my chest and my heart, because 95 is huge. Like, I could not. I mean, if I live to be 95, that would be a blessing. But if I live to be 95 and I'm in my grandmother's state where I'm mostly nonverbal, I can't move, I can't do anything, can't get out of bed, I don't have visitors, I'd rather not. I'd rather not be here. Honestly, I'd rather not be here because that's not living. That's not living. Um, so yeah, I, you know, we deal with that and think about it all the time, and unfortunately it is what it is, unless we want to try to fight this legally, which, would end up getting uglier, likely not help my grandmother at all, and could potentially anger my aunts more and cause us to be banned. And then my face will flash red on a screen. Um, but I've had so many wonderful and amazing memories with my grandmother. We've shared some awesome times, which I can't say the same for my aunts and my other cousins. They know who they are, because I know that I've shared so many times and great times and memories with my grandmother that will always be the way I remember her. That will be with me forever in my heart. And I know that she loves me incredibly, and she knows that I love her incredibly. And while, there's not much that I can do to help her in this situation that we're in, I will continue every opportunity I get to come and see her and spend some time with her, knowing that, each moment that we have left is something to be cherished. So, yeah. I don't know if I'm going to publish this. I mean, maybe I will. I'd love to hear what others think or what others have gone through. I'm sure we all have a family member who's had to be in, rehabilitation or nursing home, and maybe has experienced some, I don't know, some hardship in these nursing homes or in rehabilitation. I hope that's not the case, but from my research and reviews that I've read, and uh, it's this is a common problem. My mom has already told me that if I ever put her in a nursing home, she will disown me. She will disown me. She said, if you ever put me in a nursing home, I will disown you. When you walk out the door, don't ever come back. Because my mom sees what my grandmother is going through and how powerless she is. And, she watches these videos online, YouTube videos of people in nursing homes, these like candid camera type things where elder abuse is happening and taking place. And this is, where she has this thought that my grandmother may be, being abused at this facility. But, you see things like that and you question what's going on, and, whether there really are any good places out there. So, if you've had a family member in a nursing home, or you've experienced something like this, or you have something you want to share, that relates to this, leave me a comment. Let's talk about it. Let's, again, I don't think there's much that we can do outside of, legal, right? Going with an attorney, a family law attorney, or someone who deals with healthcare proxies and guardianships for elder, or someone who deals with elder abuse. I don't know. Um, but yeah, if you can relate to this in any way, let me know. Let me know. that's it for now, guys. I appreciate you listening, and I thank you for allowing me to vent. Until next time.